and YouTube channel. My name is Annie, and I'm the events coordinator at Majors and Quinn Booksellers, which is an independent bookstore in Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're not familiar with us, welcome. Welcome to this virtual author event. If you are familiar with us, welcome back. Maybe you are from the area. Maybe you were at the debut book launch of tonight's virtual author, Kathleen West. She was one of the last events of 2020 that we were able to do in person, and we had a wonderful time at the launch for Minor Dramas and Other Catastrophes. But today, we're so happy to have her back for the launch of her second novel, Are We There Yet? And those of you who are watching right now live are those of you who were extra special supporters of Kathleen in the book you pre-ordered from Majors and Quinn. So thank you for doing that. And we're very happy to have you here. Yes, I already see some people in the chat. Hello, welcome. Let us know where you're watching from. The chat is also where you should ask questions. We will take a few questions at the end of the event. So you can do that at any time, and we'll try to get through as many as possible at the very end of the hour. But until then, just say hello, talk to each other. We're also super excited to have Kathleen with a wonderful conversation partner for this second book. Very happy to have back a friend of the store, Nora McInerny, who will be conducting an interview with Kathleen about this book tonight. So please allow me to give you a brief introduction of our speakers. For those of you who don't know, Kathleen West is a veteran school teacher. She graduated with a degree in English from Macalester College and holds a master's degree in literacy education from University of Minnesota. She lives in Minneapolis with her A+ human family and 2 B- dogs. And Are We There Yet is her second novel. Nora McInerny is the author of It's Okay to Laugh and No Happy Endings, and the host of Terrible Thanks for Asking podcast, co-founder of the Hot Young Widows Club, and the founder of the nonprofit Still Kickin'. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here today. I will be back at the end of the broadcast to help go through questions. Until then, have fun.
We are going to have so much fun tonight.
Okay. I can't wait. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I have been a huge fan, and I'm like, I've already decided we can be best friends. So send me your number, and I'll text you constantly. So
I'm ready. All my friends will tell you that, you should look for a better best friend. But if your idea of a best friend is somebody who will remember your birthday month, but also still not send you a card, I am your gal. That's what I'm here for.
Fair enough.
That is if you keep the bar low, then I can trip over it, then we'll be good. So Kathleen, I grew up in Minneapolis. You are in Minneapolis. Like all Minneapolis people, we have to explain to people. I realize also, look, there are people, somebody is here from not Minnesota, okay, Colorado. We got all these, Chicago, okay, places that are not Minneapolis. There's a thing that we are legally obligated to do as Minnesotans, and that is to explain the 6 degrees of separation that connect us, because it's not even 6 degrees.
No, it's
really
know
what those are?
Well, I think, I might get this wrong, but I think that our mothers were friends, perhaps in lacrosse.
I think they went to high school together, actually, so I'm almost asking you to speak. I'm pretty sure. I think they also knew each other in lacrosse, because my parents did live in lacrosse. But I'm pretty sure they went to high school together, because then Devin is your cousin.
My brother.
Brother. Your mom. Devin's your mom. Just kidding. Devin's your brother.
Yes.
Our moms went to high school together. Then maybe they reconnected in lacrosse. Either way, it's a very small world. Minneapolis is. Yeah. It is a small world. And so if you are watching this and you're like, wow, why set your books in Minneapolis? This is why. Because it is a small world, and also like its own planet in a lot of ways. I know this is your second book, and I do have sort of like kind of a nerdy question for you, which is, is this also the same? Yes, it's the same city, a fictionalized version of Minneapolis, but do these people all exist in the same universe?
Yes.
Would they run into each other at Byerly's?
They would. The first book is in Liston Heights, and that's a fake name. I named it after a student who happened to be in my class in 6th grade the day that I needed to name the town, Molly Liston. So it's Liston Heights after her. Eventually I told her parents, and they're like, okay, and they bought some books off Amazon, so that was great. But then This book is in Elm Creek, which is like Eden Prairie, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next book that I just turned in on Monday is back in Liston Heights. So they are all in the same world and could run into each other in the Byerlys and be each other's therapists and teachers and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. And Liston Heights, is that, what is Liston Heights in your mind when you're imagining it? Where is Liston Heights? Is that Edina? That's what I thought. Okay. That's what I thought. Reading it, I was like, I know what this is. I know what this is. But okay, we will get back to the task at hand, which is one of the things that I love so much about your writing. One is that I want to know in the chat how far people are into the book. I know it just came out today. I was lucky enough to get an advanced copy of it. I read it in a matter of hours, in a matter of like just pure concentration. Don't speak to me, to my own children. That's me talking to my own loving children. Don't talk to me. I'm reading this book. You are just so pulled into this world. All of the characters are so recognizable. And something that I've really noticed about your writing is that you write about moms, which are very, very, it's a very, very sort of easy thing to deride mothers, to like mock them. And even when your characters are problematic, even when your characters are irritating or have their own foibles, you write so empathetically about them. Where the hell did you get that capability?
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I see myself in all of these characters. Sometimes I feel like kind of hurt if someone's like, well, that woman is really unlikable, because I am that person. Like, I imagine her, I think her thoughts, I've been her before. I think most of that like came from my teaching job. You know, one of the benefits of teaching is that you get to see so many families and so many parents. And when I was younger, like before my own kids were born, it was really easy for me to feel kind of judgmental of the other parents that I was watching. And then I had my own kids and I'm like, oh, I see, like there's no control. Like it used to be like my kid's never going to eat at McDonald's. And now it's like, please eat your nuggets before your fries. So I think like, then I realized like, oh, everyone's just trying their best. Everyone just wants their kids to turn out okay. And so I think it's my job. My job helped me.
Yeah, you do it really, really, really well. There's so much compassion even for, you know, the really sort of uptight moms or the moms who are, there's so much, I mean, so much of mothering is very, very fraught. Like mothering was not even, by the way, like a competitive sport until, I mean, in the past 20 years. Like motherhood has changed incredibly. It's gone from like a duty to a performance in a lot of ways. Which I think you observe really well.
I think that, I mean, I don't know what it was like, obviously, before I became a mom in 2004. But even then, like, I felt a lot of pressure. And I was younger too, and more susceptible to like thinking about what other people were thinking about me and acting accordingly. So I was very concerned with like, would people think that I was a good mom? And in Target, is my kid behaving or whatever, all of that kind of stuff. And were we at the right music class? And was my kid beating me with rhythm sticks at the music class? Like, yes, we had to leave. And so all of that kind of stuff, I felt it a lot. And also a lot of pressure to make the very best choice for your kid all the time. Like, what kind of instrument should they be playing and how would that impact their brains? And, you know, how much screen time should they be allowed to have? And if they are allowed to have too much, you know, more than that, then will they, you know, have some kind of lifelong consequence, et cetera. It's all been very fraught for the last 17 years anyway, that I've been part of.
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, I also have really, I wasn't a mom until I was a mom, and I was never a better mom. And it was never a better mom than when I didn't have kids. Which also I was like, yeah, they will never, I'm sorry, your child needs an iPad to sit through dinner. I would never. And I uttered the sentence, you cannot have ice cream until you eat your pizza last week, with complete seriousness. Like, oh, you can't have another simple carbohydrate until you eat this specific sodium-based simple carbohydrate. That's it. Okay.
During the pandemic, especially, all bets are off. Like, now we actually made like a legit screen time plan for our son last spring that was like no more than 8 hours of video games per day. And that was what we thought would be like a reasonable limit. And guess what? Like, we haven't stuck to it at all. That kid plays as many video games as he wants all the time.
Yeah. It's all like, when you think about, people saying like these unprecedented times, like literally every time that we are living in is unprecedented, especially when you have children, especially once you become a mother, you are doing everything for the first time. Everything. Even if you have more than one kid, guess what? Like, this is the first time, like, I'm raising this specific 4-year-old. This is the first time we are experiencing this specific moment with this child. And one of the things that I've struggled with, and I know a lot of other people have, and then I see come through so beautifully in your characters, is the admission that parenting comes with so much ego.
Yeah. Yes.
Like
Well, that's what I was really interested in with this book. Like, I started to think about this because, sometimes my kids do really great things, and sometimes I get to be there for those things, like especially their athletics. Like, if I'm at a game and my kid plays really well, maybe like 10 or 15 parents will say like, great job. And I started to think like, I didn't do anything. Like, I don't even know how to ice skate. I can't play hockey. Like, I'm not responsible for this. And then it got me thinking, like, when I do parent-teacher conferences, a lot of times I'm sitting there and I can feel that the parent thinks that I'm giving them a grade. Like, if they're getting an A in English, it means that they got an A in mothering that quarter. And I just wanted to explore that a little bit, because especially like as your kids become teenagers, they make their own choices and they make their own mistakes. And if we take credit for their successes, that means we have to be at fault for their failures. And I just don't want to. So I wanted to write about that.
Yeah, I don't want to. That's right. If our kids' successes are ours, which they're not, as you noticed, like they are not, but it sure feels like they could be, then their failures have to also be ours, which they are not. And so much of parenting, it is so easy to turn it all into a projection of who I think the only unconditional love is the love that our children have for us, which we did not earn, by the way. Like, they got born, they got brought into this family in whatever way they did. And then they look at us and they're like, you're amazing. Even though I'm like, you really actually have a very bad sample size. It's one. I can't, I mean, you should look around. If you think I'm the best mom, I just think you should like look around, meet some other moms. But like, the minute that you find out that you are going to be a parent, you have expectations.
Yes.
You have expectations.
Well, and hope about how it's going to go, and a script in your mind about how it's going to go. And Alice, like in the book, like she thinks that she's kind of at a home free stage, like her kids are old enough to kind of take care of themselves. Like, she doesn't have to change their diapers, and she doesn't even really have to, there's not much that she's doing right this second, or that she feels like she's responsible for keeping them alive. And then I think that's part of like her real struggle, is that like, even in this time that's supposed to be easier, it gets really hard.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, the whole point, we do sort of tend to believe that life will lead us to an arrival of some kind.
Yes.
That everything will be different once we get to something.
Mm-hmm. And I have a few friends, some of them are in the chat. I think it's really important, like, as a mom, I've picked like a few people that I will go to for advice, like, because if you open that too widely, you'll have all this kind of advice. In the book, I mentioned like it's like a little flashback, but she's talking about how when she first had her baby, she really thought she'd be into attachment parenting, and her mom throws away the attachment parenting book because she won't go to the bathroom without her child. And that, it reminds me of how I was when my oldest was born, and finally, my husband was like, you can only ask one person for advice, like no more books. Like, you can't do this. So I have a few parents with kids who are just a little bit older, and I trust those people for their like going on advice. Like, okay, at this next phase, what's it going to be like? Or at the phase after that. And now I've lost my train of thought because I went off on that tangent about attachment parenting. So I forgot what question I was answering, if there was one about that. Sorry.
It's just an observation. Like, you're a very good observer of humanity and of motherhood. And Martha is in the chat. Yes. Said, why don't dads feel this way? And I mean, we just haven't made them feel this way.
Yeah. Well, and somebody asked me recently about the book, like, you don't write about the dads, was the comment. And I was like, no, I didn't. In this book, I didn't. And I guess there are a couple of reasons. Like, one is I was more interested in the moms of these characters. I liked the idea of having friends that you make kind of convenience. There are a lot of times in parenting when you make friends of convenience. These moms in this book meet at kindergarten roundup, and they kind of latch onto each other and they just become default friends. And it might happen like on a kid's sports team or whatever. And you get this group of friends. And then as time goes on, like maybe you don't really have that much in common with those people and you don't really want to be their friends. And so how do those friendships change over time, and how can you kind of grow out of them or make new friends as a grown-up? And the kids are in middle school, and in some ways the parents feel like they are too, because they're just at this kind of tension point in their friendships as moms. And so I was more interested in that topic than I was in the dads. I will say, like, when I first wrote the draft and I sent it to my editor, she's probably watching too. She's amazing, Carrie Donovan. She did say, like, what's the deal? Like, either these people have to be divorced or you have to explain where the dad is. Like, he can't just be, like, you have to have a couple scenes where they have like a okay marriage. So those were kind of late, those are late additions. In my next book, I do have a dad main character who is the default parent for his child. So it's something different. But in this book, I was really interested in the moms and the female dynamics.
Yeah, and not just like the one, there's multi-generational mothering stories within this, which I really love, were all the result of the parenting, the mothering we did get or did not get.
Yes, I mean, I think that looking at how the book is a lot about disappointing your parents, and I've thought a lot about that. You know, everyone, at least I hate the feeling that I might be disappointing my parents, and I think the kids in this book feel that way too. And then also the adult children in this book also feel that way too. So like maybe you never really grow out of that. And then also I like the idea, the grandmother is in the book, Evelyn, and she kind of feels like, well, I'm done. Like I lived my life for my child. That's how she views it. And I should be able to make some different choices now that aren't centering my child. Which I also see how she would think that, you know, like, are you ever done? And how do you kind of renegotiate that relationship at a new life phase then too?
Yeah, which is, I mean, you know, it's not just the shift. There are plenty of shifts that happen, not just when you are in middle school, but we are continually discovering and rediscovering who we are in relationship to other people.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I mean, that's kind of like the title, like, are we there yet? Right? Like, no, we're not. Like, it's always every time you think that you are at like some sort of arrival zone, something else happens. I see my friend Adriana says parenting doesn't get easier as kids get older, it just gets different. And I think that's really true. And she has some adult children now too. So she's one of my a few years ahead gurus. So just get ready. Well, you have an older child also, like in their 20s or late
19.
Yeah.
19 is still technically a teen. 19, 14, 8, and 4. Okay. So big gamut. And yeah, I want it. It will, I don't know. Adriana's correct. It does not get easier. It gets different. And I'd say from experience, like we keep waiting to like get to a point where like, I don't know, like we've done it. We've arrived. We've gotten to the place that we thought we would be. And it is all just a journey. There's been a lot of comments in the chat, which I hope you are not looking at. It's very hard not to.
It's kind of hard. I think that's why I lost my train of thought that one time.
I think it is. I don't want you to look there. I'm going to look there. But so a lot of comments about the value of having a point of view from a 13-year-old too, like from like the teenagers too, and the value of remembering and realizing over and over that like everybody's just a person, unfortunately. Yes. Unfortunately.
I really like writing kids and teens. And in my first book, I had some kids that were point of view characters and they were like 16, 17. I guess the youngest one was 15. And then in this one, I went down, obviously they're 12 turning 13. And I thought it was really fun to kind of think about that time. It's such an interesting time in middle school. I've taught a lot of middle school, and you have this conversation with parents, especially in 8th grade, where they'll say like, I don't recognize my child anymore. Like, this is not the kid that I raised. A lot of times they're questioning their morals and ethics, and it's very normal at that phase. And also the kids act differently at school than they do at home. So like I might give a report like, your kid is really doing well in school and really friendly and has a lot of blah, 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 compliment. And the parents are like, that's not true. And I'm like, it is true. It's just that you're safe for them. So they go home and they show you all their terrible side, and then they come here and they do this. So I really like getting in the heads of the teenagers. I have seen some reviews on Instagram that make me smile because like the reviewer has toddlers or younger children, and they'll say like, well, this was really disturbing to hear about how the tweens think of their parents. And I'm like, I bet it is. But, just wait 10 years and you'll be ready. It'll be okay. At that phase, and you'll understand that they shouldn't see you in the same way that they saw you when they were little.
Yeah, they really shouldn't. Say that again. They shouldn't see you in the same way
that they saw you when they were little. Like you're just a different, I think it's more fun the older they get, because like you can have these real world conversations with them and really understand who they are and what they're interested in. And I really enjoy that evolution. The thing that's hard about, I think, parenting older kids is that their heartbreaks get more and more real. Like when they're little and something bad happens, it's easier to fix. And then when they're bigger, the disappointment is actually like just a really sucky disappointment. And there's no way to really get around it. And like, oh, yep, that didn't work out in your favor, and that sucks. I'm really sorry. And go ahead and do your crying. And we can't speed you through it. And I think it's kind of disappointing on both sides. Like your kid might expect you to be able to solve that, and you also want to solve it, and you can't.
Yeah. This book probably scares toddlers' parents is a comment that is absolutely true. And also, I personally, as a parent of a wide spectrum of humans, found it very reassuring. Because when you are the parent, this is also something I want to hear your reflections on is, there's so many books. People buy you books, right? About attachment. People buy you books about your baby, about your toddler. By middle school, people are like, oh, you don't know?
Yeah. Well, there's a scene in the book.
You haven't figured it out?
Well, she goes to the bookstore. I really like that scene. And if you are from here, I think most of the people are from Minneapolis. So I envision her driving down Excelsior to the Punch Pizza next to the Barnes and Noble that's in the Calhoun Village, like across from the Whole Foods. That's where they are. And she goes into that Barnes and Noble and like is crying, and the bookseller like starts throwing books at her, and she notices that the books about the toddlers and babies are in the upper right hand corner, and then books about the teens are like near the floor on the bottom, because you're not supposed to need that assistance at that time. So yeah.
And that's why you sort of keep those things to yourself, because going back to like the beginning, like your children's successes are something that you can be proud of, and you can post those on Instagram, or you can post those on Facebook. But what do you do with the parts of raising a person that scare you? You do the same thing that you do with the parts of being a human that scare you or make you insecure. You keep them to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a writer, I think it's really fun to kind of imagine those things. And I like imagining them for all kinds of different people, which is, I think, why I keep writing books with multiple points of view. Like, I like to see how these different people figure out their lives or rationalize their lives or figure out how they're going to act in situations. And they all have kind of different motivations for how they do it. So do you want me to read a little chunk of it, Nora? Is this a good time?
I want you to read a chunk of it.
Okay. I mean, not just a little, because it's going to be hard. This is the cover. I know you guys already all have it, but there it is, the cover. And then I'm just going to read a tiny bit, and it's from parent-teacher conferences. It's at the beginning, so there'll be no spoilers. And Alice, the main character, is going to a second grade conference, and she's just sure. She's never heard anything bad about any of her kids at conferences, so she's ready. And she's also in a hurry. She's going straight to a meeting. Alice texted Patrick, that's her husband, not going to make it. She'd known his absence had been a possibility, and he hadn't replied to her reminder. I've been Sackmaned, he wrote back. Senior partner Alan Sackman's whims had shaped Alice and Patrick's life for a full 9 years since Patrick had joined his law firm. She sighed. They both knew there was no way around a Sackman directive. Many a missed appointment and even one canceled family vacation to Naples, Florida, had taught them that. Patrick was about to start spending weeks at a time in Cincinnati because of Sackman, handling a trial for a case he'd been working on for years. He'd only be home on weekends. It annoyed her, sure, but they'd agreed Patrick's partnership at Sackman Feldstone was a solid investment in the future, a future in which they'd pay 2 rounds of college tuition and slowly remodel their 1925 two-story. Alice peeked into Adrian's classroom again, this time achieving meaningful, but she hoped friendly, eye contact with Miss Miller, who held up a finger, making her wait, just as Nadia had in the coffee shop. Alice perused the student work hanging in the hallway. She found Adrian's stilted 7-year-old handwriting on a detailed drawing of a spider, its hair sticking out wildly from its body. Alice smiled and raised her phone to take a photo. Adrian had always loved insects. Arachnids, she corrected herself in the case of this black widow. Adrian had lectured her just the previous week on people's too common miscategorization of spiders. Alice scanned some other drawings and saw similarly wobbly lines and eraser marks on the labels for the body parts. But as she stepped to the right to check out another row of drawings, her smile fell. Were the other kids spelling better than Adrian was? Adrian had skipped the C in black and replaced an E for an A in fangs. Harriet McMillan, who always looked like she belonged in the Crew Cuts catalog, had managed cephalothorax on her drawing of a crayfish with nary an erase mark. Alice frowned at a cross-section of a sea urchin by Esme Bizet with cortical granules written in neat, straight printing. She walked back to Adrian's picture, her letters angling up and to the right, the tails of each S trailing off in wispy pencil snakes. Alice touched her daughter's writing as the Bissettes finally exited the classroom, all beatific smiles and apologies for running over. At the same time, her phone buzzed with an incoming text message. Maybe, she hoped, B. Kerrigan was running late. That's the appointment she has after. It's okay. Alice rushed by the Bissettes and glanced at her phone. The message was not from the Kerrigans, but rather from a number she didn't recognize. Sorry to be awkward, it began, but Teddy, Alice bristled as she slid the message open, has got to lay off at school. Can't you do something about this? That's her son. So there you go, just a little segment.
Rachel in the chat said the handwriting angst is very real in our house. So is ours. I could almost reach over and show you.
Mm-hmm.
Handwriting. That's the opening part of the book, and I love it because it sets up all of this tension of this very good mother and her very perfect son. And can Teddy lay off, Kathleen? I don't want to ruin anything. I'm the worst. I want to talk about every part of this book, but also it's the first day the book has come out. Not everybody has read the whole thing. Okay.
Well, Teddy is her son, and he has some problems at middle school. And my sister is a social worker, and so I asked her about what might be his issue. And I'm not going to remember now what she told me, but it's something about identity, like exploring your identity. There's like a real phrase for it that I did put in the book. And so he's just experimenting with some alter egos that might be a little bit more daring and edgy than anyone would want it to be.
Individuating.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Individuating, which is also it's not completely unique to teenagers, to tweens. Like that is something that a lot of the characters in life that you meet every day are also doing. And I mean, also in the book, isn't everybody just trying on versions of themselves until they find one that feels sustainable?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's true. And then I think part of the issue is that there's sort of a low tolerance if you want to try on a different one, especially Alice's mom, Evelyn, like she has this new relationship in her life and she wants to explore it. She feels some urgency around it. And everyone else is kind of intolerant of that. I don't think it's too big of a spoiler to say that Alice's mother ends up having a child that she had placed for adoption that is now back into her life. And so while Alice has all these crises with her children, her mom also wants to introduce her to her new sister that Alice rejects. So that's kind of her thing too. Like, she's like, I feel urgent about this. I'm a different person than you think I am. And her family's not open to that either.
And all you want is, especially if you're a person who's provided consistency to the people in your life, Evelyn deserves the ability to have a little bit of latitude. And also you can understand Alice's tension, which is, can one thing stay the same? Can like anybody else hold it together so that I don't have to?
Yes, I think that's really true. Like she feels like everything, like the ground is just shifting beneath her and nothing will stay the same. And when my husband was reading this book, he was like, I'm so stressed out. Like everything bad keeps happening to her. And why does everyone have to keep making bad choices? And I was like, well, Dan, like, have you ever read a book where you just meet a nice person and they just go through a regular time in their life? Like, would that be an interesting story for you? But I do feel like it's, the tension is definitely there. Like she doesn't have that steady person in her life. She has one, her friend, Nadia, who actually is the mom of the problem child, like the kid on the behavior plan. Is the most steady person that she has. And it's very hard for her because she has spent a lot of time distancing herself from Nadia. Like, oh, that kid has this problem. I've Googled it. I understand what's wrong with him and what she's doing wrong. And that's not going to happen to me. And then her kid ends up like doing pretty well. He's doing really well at this time. And she doesn't even recognize that. She's just like, I'm still not going to be like you. So she kind of alienates the one friend, at least for a little while. That could be her biggest ally in this situation. Yeah.
Tell us about developing different voices for this many characters, because there are a lot of them.
Yeah, there are. And I see a question from Amy, my friend Amy, who says like the dialogue, how it's different for the high school kids versus the middle school kids and how they talk. That's kind of interesting. I spend a lot of time writing. Like I'm not a very efficient writer. I don't know about you, Nora, but I write like maybe 250,000 words that's like a final book is like 90,000 words. And I think I probably write 250,000 words to get down to the 90. I know it's not a good way to go.
It's working for you though. So
all three books, like I've written basically full manuscripts, and then I have a moment where I send the manuscript to Joanna, my agent, who's watching and brilliant also, and she's like, "Okay, super, you're a brilliant genius, and now start over." And I've kind of learned that that's just sort of the process. Like usually a major character gets cut, or like a whole section gets cut, something happens there, and I think through all of those revisions, like I just come to know the characters more. When I was writing this book, I took a class that was really interesting with the author Nina LaCour, and she has an exercise that really helps get into the heads of the characters, where you think of your character and then you think of their 5 pivotal life events, which you probably are not going to put in the book, right? Mm-hmm. Like it could be like Alice's prom, you're not going to write about that for the book. But the idea is you think of what the 5 moments are and then you write those scenes. One of Alice's was that her dad fell off a ladder. And so like I wrote that whole scene, that none of it is in the book. But if you do that, if you kind of write all the scenes, like not only do you kind of get a sense of their psyche, but there's a lot of like tiny details then that you can just sort of drop in that I think make each of them a little bit different. So that helps. And in terms of the dialogue question, I don't know. I think I've spent a lot of time around middle school kids and high school kids. I live with a high school kid and a middle school kid, so I can hear their voices in my head. I did go down in my 3rd book, there's a 9-year-old point of view character. So that was really different. I guess just listening to the real life people.
Yeah. I mean, did you ever like give your children bits of the book to read and say, does this feel true for you?
I didn't. I did ask them to educate me about Snapchat. And they were not amenable to that request. I was like, could I please have some lessons on the Snapchat? Like, how would you, because I know you can't, you can delete the photo, you can't screenshot the photo, but they wouldn't tell me that stuff. So I just had to use the Google. I did ask a few questions, like, would you do this? Would you do this? But they're not super great at helping me with book research.
Rude. Come on.
I know. I was writing some scenes about hockey. My next book has a lot of hockey, and they both played hockey. And the other night, I was just at the table. I just needed one thing. Like, tell me one drill that could get messed up. No, neither of them could give me even one single hockey drill. So there you go.
So I don't know. I've never messed up a drill, Mom. I could not possibly help you with that.
Not a drill killer.
I couldn't do that. Snapchat is a banned app. In this household, it just makes me extremely anxious and uneasy. And I also think it is the perfect app to use in this book, because this book has such a theme of secrets and of consequences and of the permanence of decisions that you believe to be impermanent.
Yes. And that's a big theme of teenagerdom, I think, right? Like you can't totally understand the consequence of your action. So that's for sure. Like secrets are definitely a big deal. I see my son says it's Thomas West 22. He says that's cap, meaning like that's a lie. Cap is a lie. So he says he did tell me.
Way to go, Thomas. Where were you 6 months ago? Okay. You could use that dialogue. Okay.
Yeah, he says that that he did tell me about Snapchat. So maybe I didn't give him enough credit. Yeah, there's Instagram also, and I'm not sure. I feel like kids are like off the Instagram already, and they're on to the Snapchat and the TikTok, and you can't keep up. That's how they keep ahead of you. Move on to the next.
Yeah, the minute that we are on an app, it is done. Even though I will say, we invented the app. Like we invented the apps. Okay, there's nothing that you can do as a teenager that we haven't already done, including all of your favorite outfits. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
All of your favorite outfits. Your children are now wearing, by the way. All the things that you wore when you were a teenager are cool again. And that is very disturbing to me as a mother.
You can never tell what's going to happen with the fashion. It's true.
You just can't. You just can't. So we invented apps. There's nothing, guys, we don't need help with the apps. We already know about this. But it's not just social media platforms that, are that have, I don't know, that come into play in like sort of the intergenerationality of the story. It's all of these decisions. When Evelyn gives up her child, it's an era where it is not impossible, but much, much more difficult to find a birth mother than it is today.
Yes.
Alice's middle school experience, Evelyn's middle school experience is truly nothing like like the children's middle school experiences. And so there's just this really, you just have a very beautiful way of pulling that all together and making the story of a boomer mirror that of a middle schooler.
Yeah. I mean, I think like going through life changes as an older person is something real that happens to people. And it's a big deal for her. I actually feel, sometimes, besides parents of toddlers saying that they can't really deal with the teenagers in this book, another thing that people will tell me is that they feel like Evelyn is really selfish. And I can see how people would say that. But when I first started writing this book, I thought the adoption angle would be a much bigger part of the story. I'm really interested in adoption. I was adopted at birth and reunited with my birth parents as a teenager. And so I was wanting to write about that, not in an autobiographical way, but just in general. And so I thought that was going to be a bigger part. But then as I started going, I got really into the teens' voices. So that part kind of took center stage. But I have experienced like the urgency and like the fierceness of those relationships when they first develop. And you can't really say like, well, I'm going to put this away and deal with it in a year. Like Evelyn can't really say like, well, I'm going to make this, I won't deal with this until it's the right time for you, Alice. I'm going to, she kind of had to go through that when she was going through it. And people do, you can't always make every single sacrifice for your kids. So it's okay if people think that Evelyn is selfish, but I don't think she is.
I don't think she is either. And I will watch the comments to see what other people think about Evelyn. I don't think she's selfish. And I also do think back to, people wondering, well, why don't you write about the dads? Like dads historically are not held to the same standard. People would not call a working dad. Nobody calls a working dad selfish, right? Nobody even calls a working dad. It's just a dad with a job, but we have like different phrases. Are you a working mom? Are you a stay-at-home mom? Like it's not all work. So yeah. I think it's very,
Yeah, I see that somebody asked about like the idea about likability in characters and what I think about that. And it is a big thing in reviews. I don't know if you've seen this lately, Nora, but I do see like, I really liked these characters. I didn't like these characters, or I didn't like any of these characters, or, and that would be like a reason that you might connect or not connect with a book. I don't know. I don't really need to like a character myself to really get into a novel. Maybe that's because I just thought like I read a lot of mysteries and thrillers. And so I read a lot of books like narrated by serial killers and kidnappers and stuff. And I always get into those characters too. And it's never a reason for me not to like a book because I can't relate to wanting to murder 20 or 30 people. I like the idea of the complexity of the people. And I want to be honest about the parts of them that feel flawed or maybe not like perfectly formed. So I guess I prefer realistic to likable.
Yeah. And also, I mean, to your point, to your husband, like, have you ever read a book where nothing happens to a person? Like that's honestly, sometimes that's all I want. I'm like, just give me a story where like everything works out and there's like no roadblocks and there's no plot. Just tell me a story that puts me to bed and makes me feel good about the world. But it is the yes and of life, which is that somebody said in the comments, isn't it okay to be selfish? Yes. And sometimes you don't have sometimes you can be selfish and be doing the absolute right thing for yourself, and it can hurt somebody else. Yes. There's just a lot of and in this book.
Yes. And I really like what you said. Like, you can be doing the exact right thing for yourself and it hurts somebody else. I think that's what's going on with her, like, and she can't make every decision to not hurt somebody else. She has to do it. And I think like she's facing a lot of grief. You do a lot of writing and talking about grief, and Evelyn is feeling a lot of it. I think she has this grief and regret that she's lived with for 40 some years about not knowing her child. And then she has the opportunity to know her child. And so that becomes the primary thing that she's doing in the time of the novel. And it's really bad timing for everyone else.
Yeah. There's a comment that's like, that says, from Amy, heck of a commenter, we love her. Female character is selfish, unlikable equals a male character who is complex. And that is very true. And also, I think we don't just think as readers, people don't just think in those gendered ways about the characters that they're creating. They think about it as a reflection of the writer too. Nobody has said about, I can't name a male writer, but if I did, nobody says about Stephen King, like, well, it just wasn't very likable. I don't know. Yes,
I don't know. That is really true. Yes. Now that you say that, I'll have to think about which male writers, or like when I'm reading book reviews, I'll think about whether that statement is made about male writers and whether or not it's a factor on if you like their book or not, if you like their characters. So,
and also if you even read their book, and I'm pulling this out of my butt, but I know there's a statistic out there somewhere that supports this. It is not just it's not just my own personal experience, which is like at any reading you've done, how many men are there who aren't related to you?
Yeah, no, there aren't. I mean, I think the statistic is that 80% of book buyers are women. So the people, like, readers are women. So like this genre that I write in is called women's fiction, but like really it's just fiction. Like most readers are women. So yeah, I think that's definitely true. Like the writers that I read are mostly women, and the people who read my books are mostly women too, except for the men in my family. They read books.
Right. If there's a man at one of my readings, I'm always like, who made you come? Who? Or are you lost? Is there an aftermind?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I was honestly unaware that there was such a genre as women's fiction.
Yeah, this is what it is. I mean, I think women's fiction, like the definition of it is that it's a book about like the emotional journey of a character. But most books are about that. Like, almost every book is that. And I think women's fiction, it's like that's the primary. So it's not primarily a romance or primarily a mystery. It's primarily the emotional journey of the character is the definition. And it's like a contemporary, like more upmarket, less literary fiction than regular fiction.
That bothers me too. We won't get too ranty, but just like, what does it mean to be literary? I just think that's such a strange, sort of dismissive way to talk about books, because yes, all books are about an emotional journey. They're all like, it's all the same story told a million different ways.
I think like writing a readable book, that's my goal. Like I want the sentences to be interesting and fun, and I want people to say like, wow, that was such a cool turn of phrase, or what an interesting detail that she put in there. But I also really want, like at the beginning, you said you read the book really fast. Like I want that. Like I want someone to take it on the airplane, finish it in the airplane ride, get off the plane and hand it to their friend and be like, you have to read this. That's the kind of book that I love to read, and that's the kind of book that I want to write.
I love that. Also, for your sake, I hope people get off the plane, keep the book, show the cover to their friend and say, you should buy this.
Yes, put it on your Instagram and say, everybody please buy this. So 100%.
Exactly. How much of your own experiences end up in your novels? I'm mostly a nonfiction writer, so I find fiction fascinating. And I'm like, tell me how you lied for 250 pages.
Ooh.
How'd you make it all up? Okay.
Great question. I mean, a lot of my like sensibility is definitely in the book. I mean, one other, like my husband also noticed, he's like, your first book is very you, like it's, you know, I'm recognizable as the main character in a lot of ways. Like it's in a school, I lived in a school, like there's nothing about it that's really different from my life. But this one, he's like, you just made up these people and it's a totally different world. And I don't really know, like, I don't know how I did that, except for to really think about, like I was saying before, like all their life details and who they are and how they interact and what happens to them. And I steal some things. In this story, like so the kid at the beginning, what he does is he does it right away. So I don't think it's too much of a spoiler. Like Teddy's on stage and there's this kid he's annoyed at school and he pantses the kid. And he thinks that he says he thinks that he's just going to get like the outer layer of pants, but all the pants come down and like half the audience sees the front and everyone sees the back. And it's bad because there have been a few other things between them going forward. And now this is a big deal. Well, I thought that this had come like straight out of my memory, but then someone that I know that's on the chat told me that she's like, reminded me that this happened to her husband. And I'm like, oh, so at some point I internalized that story and then wrote about it without realizing, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like everything that's happened to me in 43 years.
I also lived through something like this.
Oh, really? Maybe it was the same thing.
Might have been the same thing.
So
it might have been the same thing. And yeah, that feeling of just absolute, you can never also know anybody's, you can never know like the truth of somebody's motives or what they want. Like we only know the versions of people that they choose to present to us.
Yeah. And I think it's true, like I said, the kid says, and I don't even know if he knows. It's like that old book, The Separate Piece. Have you read A Separate Piece? You know, the boarding school book? Okay, well, the friends of mine who went to visitation, we read this. Don't write it down. It's old. It's like from World War II. But there's a kid in that, and the question is like, does he know that he jumped on the branch? And if he jumped on the branch and made his friend fall, gets paralyzed, yada, yada, yada. And he doesn't really know. Like, he doesn't know if he did it on purpose or not. Like, and same with Teddy. Like, he doesn't know if he exposed Jane to the school on purpose or not. You know?
Yeah.
It's like this moment of impulsivity that he had. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Who gave you all the good therapist advice in this book?
My sister is a social worker.
Right.
I actually had I wrote the therapy first and then she read it and she was like, yeah, it's good. Like, it's right. I mean, I've had a lot of therapy, so I've been in the session, so I know kind of how it goes, but I did have a massive problem that my copy editor caught with HIPAA. And she's like, you've got some real issues here. Like, there's some ethical violations. And I was like, oh, shoot. So then Mary, my sister, and I went back and like we fixed the HIPAA problem together. But yes, I needed a lot of experts for this book because I don't know anything about any of these things. Like, none of the interior design. I don't have any sense of style. So like I needed that, and Sadie, it does synchronized skating. I don't know anything about that. Like, so there were just a lot of things.
Very impressed by those details, honestly. I was like, I've never even heard of synchronized skating. We're inventing new sports all the time now?
Yeah, well, my friend Ann Nervig's daughter does it. And I think I must have put it in there knowing that that was true, you know, because why else would I put that in? But then luckily I could ask Ann. I sent her the synchronized skating chapter and she's like, here's what the parents would say about that fall. I'm like, perfect.
Great. Wow, that's so wonderful. That's so resourceful. And I love that. I love that you chose characters who, for your second book, who were so different from you and had those resources to pull in that kind of detail. Mary has a good point. Impulse control is tough for teens. And also, which I believe you pointed out in the book, it's like they don't even have a fully developed prefrontal cortex until they're 25.
Yeah.
So we expect so much of people who look like small adults when they are really just incredibly large children.
Yeah, you have to like give them a lot of leeway. It's just, you have to. And I think you have to just give everybody a lot of leeway.
Yeah. A lot of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. A lot of forgiveness.
A lot of grace. We have exactly 10 minutes left. We've been pulling in audience questions, but we are going to open it up for a full-on Q&A right now.
So put them in there so that it's not like an awkward pause.
Yeah, I would like you to just sing your favorite song.
Yes, ask more questions. I'm back. You guys have grabbed all the questions that I saw so far. My cat he was there the entire time I was not on screen. And then of course, like, you don't get to see the cat. So I have a question, and I'm glad that you mentioned, Kathleen, you kind of brought up the interior design. So Alice, the mom in this newest book, is an interior designer, and she's very career driven. And I was wondering about how like that aspect of her career being as super important to her, in addition to her, trying to be the best mother she can be, and all that pressure she puts on herself. The mother in Minor Dramas, remind me her name?
Julia.
So Julia has like a slightly different story. It's like the other side of this very fraught motherhood coin, where you learn like she had a very promising career, but actually has not worked for some time while raising her children. And there's like both of these women kind of go through this emotional ringer in different ways. And so I just was wondering, like, did you intentionally do that? Like, you wanted to throw the career side of this motherhood pressure into a novel, or was it maybe unconscious?
Well, I am really interested in careers in general. I didn't think about that when I started this book, but always Alice had this kind of high pressure career, and I liked the idea of her being at a stage in her life where she could focus more on that career. And that kind of mirrors I've always had a teaching career. I took a year off of teaching when each of my children were born, but otherwise I've taught steadily and really enjoyed it and been immersed in it. But when Mac, my younger son, turned 6, that's when I started writing. Like, I felt like I had enough headspace to have a hobby, and at first writing was my hobby, and now it's become a career as well. And so I think I was thinking about Alice at that same age. Like, her daughter is 7. She feels like she has time now to do, to advance in her career. And so that's the moment when everything kind of falls apart for her. I also really liked the idea that her career was about appearances. And her mother doesn't approve of that. Like, her mother is like really earthy and, doesn't wear makeup and kind of like purposefully anti-fashion, and doesn't really like that Alice appreciates the way things look. But I think I liked looking at that, because I don't think that Alice, she is about appearances, but she also is about the other stuff. So I liked kind of that tension that developed there between her and her mom around her career.
Yeah. Here's one from Allison. What is the biggest difference between the first draft and the final book?
Well, something fun that we add, there are huge differences. Like, Alice used to have a younger sister that disappeared at one point. Like I said, this was completely rewritten from start to finish. But one of the last things that Carrie, my editor, and I added was the little mystery about the spray paint. There's a spray painting mystery that comes up in the beginning. In the first scene, Alice is reading the Nextdoor app, which I don't know if you read that. It's really bad to engage on the Nextdoor app. Very toxic as a social media platform, but also kind of funny sometimes. So she's reading it, and there's this woman on there who's like, there's a spray painting of a rocket ship at the park, and it's not. It's like male anatomy. So there's a mystery that goes through the book about who's doing the spray painting, and that is something that we added at the end. So I kind of like doing that.
Yeah, that was a fun part. A lot of people saying they can't wait to read it. Aaron's asking, are you able to do some virtual touring to launch the book? So yes, this is your launch. Where else are you headed?
Well, I'm doing like I should put these on my website or something, but I as I mentioned, like I just finished that third book on Monday, so I was kind of crunched, but I have a couple Instagram things coming up, and then I'm going to be on Fox 9 News, Local People, on Thursday morning at like 9:30, I think. I'll put it on my Instagram so people can see. I've never been on TV before, so this will be very exciting, and I'm sure to mess up. And then in June, I'm doing a really fun event, Literature Lovers Night Out through Valley Bookseller. And I was supposed to do that event last March, and it got canceled. And so I'm very, very excited to do that one. And there's information about that online too. So
yeah, those are super fun. Can you talk about the cover? Question from Nicole.
Ooh, yes. Well, this cover was pretty simple. The last cover, which you can see over my shoulder there, went through a lot of iterations. It was completely different. And then the sales team wanted that. And I really like that. So I was super happy. And this time it's the same designers. And they sent us like 3 different choices of images. And actually I asked my family, my brother Devin is really good at this kind of stuff. So he helped me. And so we ended up, obviously going with this one, but it was pretty simple. There was like maybe a couple objects that weren't the soccer ball and the keychain at first, like other things. But I really like the grass, and the soccer ball says #1 mom. So this cover was pretty easy for me, not for the designers.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Aaron asks, how did your personal adoption story influence Alice's story?
Well, actually, when I first started writing, I was interested. I have 2 sisters that are half sisters, one on my birth mother's side and one on my birth father's side. And I was thinking about their reactions to sort of my arrival. Because if you put me in the book, like in terms of the adoption story, then I would be Evelyn's birth daughter. You know what I mean? Like the sister that comes in. So that's kind of the way I was sort of imagining the other people's reactions to the arrival of the secret child. And they're not thrilled about it. So I was just kind of trying to think about that. And one reason that they're not thrilled about it is because they don't know her, and she seems, more perfect than she is. You find out later that she's not quite the veneer, she doesn't match her appearances either. But yeah, so otherwise my personal story is not really reflected in the book, except for the fact that I have a personal story.
Right. Have you incorporated the pandemic into your next story from KK?
Well, this is really, so we moved this book back a year. It used to take place in 2020 when I wrote it, but then we weren't sure. So I finished it a year ago, and we weren't sure what 2020 was going to look like. And so I'm really glad we did move it back a year, because it wouldn't have worked. Like they're in school and doing their sports and stuff. Also, like she homeschools Teddy for a short period of time. And so everyone now will react differently to homeschooling than they did a year ago. The next book I've pushed forward. It's in 2022 to 2023. And so I just didn't want to deal with it. Like I have a few lines that are like, this guy still insists on handshakes even after the pandemic, but otherwise I don't really talk about it. I don't know why. I didn't want to. I have a few friends that have written pandemic stories, and I think they're brilliant, but I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah, fair. I don't think you have to. Like it. Yeah. How do you find yourself thinking about how your characters would react to current events? Do they live in your head? That's from Mary.
Not really. Some people say this, like the characters, the way that they live in my head is like, if I make myself start writing, which I always have to do, I never feel really excited to get to work. But once I start, like if I show up for the scene and I'm in the scene, then sometimes they'll say something, or like something happens, or I realize a connection that is exciting to me. So in that way, they live in my head, but I don't think about how they would react to The Bachelor or, Orphan Black, whatever television show I'm watching, etc.
Where does the process start for you? Is it a character and then you build out a life around them? Is it a place, an event? How do you find your way in? That's from Devin.
The first book came from an event. Like I thought about the cast list and the reaction of that mom at the finding out about the play. If you've read that book, I think most people have. This one, it wasn't. There wasn't a. I can't remember exactly. It's a little bit different, you know, when you start writing a book with your team. Like my agent and my editor are involved from the beginning. So with that last book, I got to decide, you know, where it started. I worked on it for several years on and on. And this book, like I wrote a detailed 4-page synopsis and some sample chapters, and we went back and forth and talked about how the story might develop. It developed completely differently from that. But, you know, you're not so much in a vacuum. And like I said before, I think it started, I wanted to explore that adoption issue, but then I started writing Teddy and Sadie, that's the other teen character, and their story kind of exploded without a plan. So I guess it went off in a completely different direction than where we thought it was going to go.
Nice. Oops, someone here says, loves the cover. Already put my sticker on my computer. Yay. I'm glad the sticker made it and everything. Here is a question from Tyable. Do you think your books will continue into parents of college-age students, or is the middle school age maybe your sweet spot? You already mentioned a younger character coming up.
Yeah, I went down. I kind of want to write a murder book, like a thriller or a mystery. So I don't know.
She says joyfully, by the way.
I need to talk to my editor about that. So Carrie, we can talk about that later, but I'm not sure. I think that I will continue to write from multiple points of view. I think that's something that I really enjoy and I think I do well. And I think people kind of recognize that as my style. So I'm not ready to move away from that right now. And I'm sure that there will be characters of different ages, and I do really enjoy writing kids. So I would imagine that whatever future project will probably have some kids.
Well, yeah, you're so good at it. Like it's always nice to have the kids' voices in there. So here, I think we're going to do one more question. Okay. Here's one from Janet. I like this question. As you draft, do you jump in order through each point of view, or do you focus on the timeline of one character at a time?
Probably I would go faster if I did it in order, but I don't. I use a technique that a writing teacher taught me, Mary Carol Moore taught me this one, and she's like, write down write down like 20 scenes that you think are going to be in your novel someplace. And so like I'll open a notebook to the back and just write down like 20 scenes. And then I just choose randomly which one I want to write that day. Because I don't like drafting. It's really hard for me. I have to like make myself sit at the computer by saying you have to sit here for another 10 minutes or you can't have coffee till you write 200 words. Like it has to be like, it's painful. So making it less painful means not going in order. So I just kind of jump around to whatever scene I think might be interesting that day.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks, Janet. That was a great question. Someone says, a murder book with moms. And so I'm going to put on my bookseller hat for that. If you want a murder book with moms, there is a book called The Perfect Mother by, I do not know how to pronounce her first name, actually. It's like Maile, M-A-I-L-E, Maile Malloy. Oh. And it's a murder book with moms, and that's all I'll say.
Okay.
It's twisty, but so that's a good one. And, you know, soon to be another book in the Pantheon from Kathleen, maybe under a pen name, as someone suggests.
Yeah, indeed.
That would be fun. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for your fantastic questions and comments and nice words and just waves. It's really great to see you all here. Thank you, Nora, for your wonderful, wonderful questions, for moderating everything. And someone just asked me. I'm writing the name of the author in there.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, everyone who's watching, like we said, you've already got your copy of Are We There Yet? Or it is in the mail on its way to you if you live far away. And we thank you for that. If you're interested in checking anything else out, you can always head to majorsandquinn.com. We have Kathleen's other book, we have books by Nora McInerny. So you can just head over to the website, search by title or author. And if you have anyone who also purchased the book and was unable to watch live with us this evening, this link will continue to work, that you can send it along to them so they can watch when it's more convenient for them. It will remain on our Majors and Quinn YouTube channel, and will be publicly available very soon. So thanks very much, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Brian. Thanks, Kathleen.